Remember our last study on this series of New Beginning titled, Is Your Temper Crying for Help? We discussed Cain and his temper. We did mention specifically how God tried to reach out to him concerning his emotions and how Cain did not deal with it. Next we knew Cain had murdered his brother because he made him feel bad about the offering he had brought before God. As far as Cain was concerned, it was Abel's fault. If Abel didn't do something that made him feel bad, he would not have gotten killed. It doesn't really matter what the reason is. There are just issues, excuses for the outlet of something within that is crying to be addressed. After Abel died, Cain moved on with his life, married, and had children. Although we had no more records of a display of his anger, we can be certain that it didn't end with Abel's death. How do I know for sure? Because every issue that we sweep under the rug does not stay under the rug. It will always creep out anytime a trigger is pulled and thereafter crawl back beneath the rug to stay out of sight. What we do in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas. It floats out as rumors at first, then settles as bitter truth. Too hard to swallow, but truth all the same. It is necessary for us to seek appropriate help to enable us confront those weaknesses instead of tucking them away so we can overcome them and live free. It's also essential for the next generation who will be raised in a toxic environment where the manifestation of these bad attitudes will seem like a norm to them. It's just the way Daddy is. That's what Mom does whenever she's upset. Our next generation who are exposed to this grow up seeing these bad behaviors as the normal response to those triggers. Because they know no better, the course of their life is derailed by a habit we as the parents and adults in their lives refuse to deal with. Cain's murder didn't end with Abel. We do not have details of how his sons and grandsons vented whenever they were upset, but somehow along his lineage, something worth mentioning in those lines showed up again. Lamech was born, and he followed in the steps of his ancestor. A young man offended him, and Lamech off the guy, then comes home to recite the story to his family and declare his judgment, making due reference to Cain's action many years before. Like his ancestor Cain, it wasn't a repentant Lamech confessing brokenheartedly to his family about the evil he had done. He was an unrepentant man, announcing that he should not be dead or cursed, or someone will have to pay for it. A man without remorse, blaming the victim for making him do what he did. Like Abel, it was the victim's fault. He made me do it. He left me no choice. This reminds me of a time I was journeying closely with a friend who had lived in an abusive marriage for years. One day, the husband descended on her in front of her daughter and her younger sister who was visiting at the time. When the younger sister stepped in to plead for her big sister, the husband turned on her as well. My friend managed to run into the kitchen and lock the door. She called me, and I could hear the man screaming and trying to break down the door to get to her. The sound of it all was so scary I was immobilized. I just couldn't process all that. I couldn't think of anything at all. Until today, I never told my friend the impact of that event on me, even from a distance. Naturally, I would have jumped up, driven over to help a friend in distress. But that day, all the venom pouring out from an enraged man left me frozen on the spot, right where I was, with the phone in my hand, until my friend called later to say they were out of the house and on their way to a safe place. She managed to escape, but the beating was so bad she ended up in the hospital. She chose not to go back to the marriage thereafter. In her attempt to save the marriage, she enrolled for counseling and was encouraging the husband to come along or choose a different counselor, but most importantly, to get the help he needed. The husband refused, claiming he was okay, that nothing was wrong with him and everything was her fault. Different advices were coming from families and friends that she was confused about what next to do. All I remember telling her was that I was afraid that guy was going to kill her one day. She didn't think it would get to that, but she was still sincerely searching for solutions, a way to solve the problems and save her marriage. During one of their meetings, she was hoping to see a sign of repentance, anything to assure her of some change of heart, to encourage her to move back in. When he said, "You should know better. You know what upsets me, and you should know that you shouldn't be doing those. Or one of these days, it's going to be said that someone killed someone." That was it. At that point, it dawned on her that she might not live to raise her child or tell her story if she continued with the marriage as it was. Have you ever done something wrong and felt convinced it was the other person's fault? That you wouldn't have done the wrong you did if they didn't push your button? Have you ever been around people who always blame others for the mess they make? How does it feel watching that unfold? Truth is that we cannot blame others for the choices we make, no matter how they may have influenced the decisions that led to those choices. It is definitely true that others can influence our choices. Still, as adults, we are responsible for our actions. If we cannot go to the court of law and get away by blaming someone for our actions, how can we expect that to hold in the court of heaven? In your journal, can you look back and recall times you have blamed others for your decisions and actions? Going forward from here, what can you do differently to take responsibility for your emotions, your decisions, and your actions? Do you need help to navigate this aspect of your journey? God is our ever-present help. He can help us through anything and everything if we will trust and obey His guidance and directions. There are also professionals trained to walk us through these challenges so we can grow strong enough to resist the urge to continue in that destructive path. When we take responsibility for our actions, it empowers us to seek the help we need to make the changes that are necessary. When we shift the blame to others, it excuses us, so we really don't have to do anything to get better. When we blame others for our actions, it robs us of the power to seek the help we need and take steps toward change. They have to change. They have to stop, and we don't have to do anything. If they have to do everything and we don't have to do anything, that will never make us better people. From my experience working with youths and adults going through addiction recovery, The biggest regret most of the adults harbor is not just the damage they did to themselves as a result of unhealthy habits. It's more so the adverse impacts of their choices on their families, the gut-wrenching grief of how those unhealthy habits influenced and most often messed up the lives of their younger ones. It is heartbreaking to hear, and even worse to watch the repetitive cycle. Children see what the adults in their lives do more than they hear what is said. Children often grow up with lifestyles that are modeled before them. And who would blame them? It takes more effort to break out and walk an unknown path than it takes to follow a pattern. The root cause of the majority of addictions stem from childhood traumas and patterns that children were exposed to, which they may hate growing up, yet they unconsciously adopt, not knowing any better. Even those that know better feel helplessly pulled to the only way they know to deal with things in life. One of the signs of maturity is that we are able to look our error in the face and own it before God and before those who are affected, to accept responsibility for what we have not done right, and to seek ways to right the wrong. That is the way God calls us, the way of genuine repentance, where we are not sorry because we were caught in the act, but we are heartbroken because what we did was wrong. And as a result, we resolve to do the best we can to change our ways and ensure it does not repeat. We have to do our own part through repentance with determination not to return to the same way, and by faith, trust God to help us when we are weak or unsure of how to make things right. How can you address and possibly correct the wrongs done to loved ones and others? How can you make and keep things right going forward? Make that commitment in your journal today and invite God to help you on this path you are choosing. If you would need additional help, who can you talk to? When will you do that? Remember that a little step today is better than a huge leap planned for the future. Do what you can today, and God will open doors for the rest to fall in line. Check out the links and the scriptures below for additional help. Feel free to share your thoughts and answers in the comments. Be inspired. You are a star, and it's your time to shine. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with family and friends. Jump in and join me in the next video, still on this series of New Beginning, as we dig through the question, who is afraid of death?